You know, I think as you get older in life, you kind of start to wonder, like, what's this all about? You start to question things, you know, whereas you've sort of grown up and you're like, I'm just doing what people say to do, what's the right thing to do, what I think should be, what society deems correct. And then you get to a point in your life where you're like, what is this all for? You know, like in my business life and my own life, I've had the privilege of having certain things that happen in my life made me question why I do the things that I do. And I've kind of fumbled and stumbled and tripped and fallen and intuitively found my feet. But with this interview with a good friend of mine, Dr. Adam Fraser, he's the guy that researches this stuff. He's the guy that you call, who interviews everyone, who finds out what makes people tick. He's a wealth of knowledge, and I think you're truly going to love this interview, episode of Life Lessons TV number 29 with Dr. Adam Fraser. So Life Lessons TV, look, it's going to be sort of, I think, a little bit edgy. I think it's going to be a little bit off the cuff. I'm letting you know now that once I get excited about a topic, I might swear a little bit. I might let a couple of curses go. So it's one of those things where I think I just want things to be kind of real. Hey guys, Adrian D'Amico here. Welcome to another episode of Life Lessons TV, episode number 29, and I'm joined by Dr. Adam Fraser. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, good to see you.
Likewise. Thank you. I've been hounding you for about 12 months to come on this show, and I'm so glad that you're here because people don't know, like, you're a... we've known each other for a long time. I was just saying off camera.
You made me feel old, yeah.
We're both getting to that point. But I remember from the gym, this is going back about 25 years ago. It was like mid-90s, which is frightening. Yeah. And we've got a mutual friend, Mark. Yep. So that's how I met you, is through Mark. And mate, I've just seen you grow from like the guy in the gym, studying his ass off, and to speaking. I remember you doing some speaking with Doug Maloof when I was a part of the Doug Mail group. So, and now I've seen you on Sunrise. I get to, to watch you on TED Talks and all sorts of shit like that. So it's been amazing to know someone personally go through that transition and watch you grow. So congratulations. But for those of you who don't know who you are and what you do, can you kind of give us a little snapshot?
So we have a company called eLab, which stands for the Evolution Lab, and what we look at is how do organizations and individuals evolve to stay relevant. So we kind of get hired to solve problems. So school principal well-being is a massive issue, you know, in terms of mental health and physical health. So we got hired by some principals to go, well, how do we solve that problem? So what we do is bring in research partners. So we kind of study the job and pull their whole world apart, and then we go, well, here's how they can improve their well-being, and we teach them how to do that. We got hired by the royal family in Kuwait to look at how do we make the country happier, which is, a fascinating thing. But also, like, I'm staring at a bank across the road. A bank recently hired us to look at their home loan lenders. So they said, we've got some great lenders and some lenders that suck. What we want to understand is what makes a great lender great, and then teach the rest how to do that. So our company is, we solve problems. And I also do a lot of presentations at conferences. So I probably do about 100 keynotes a year.
Wow.
It used to be 150, but then I decided to stay married, so now I do 100.
Good choice.
That's kind of my thing.
I love it.
Yeah.
What's interesting about your work, as I was chatting to you off air before, like I kind of stumble through things. My way of learning is to generally make mistakes and then learn from them and grow and all that kind of stuff. So you have a knack of really researching into the why people tick and why they do the things that they do.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that I think I really want to chat about today, and one is around your work around the third space.
Yep.
I guess our followers are more sort of entrepreneurial business type, but also everyday people. Like, my thing is, we're all trying to do things great in the world.
Yep.
But we're mums and dads and we're brothers and sisters, and shit happens in life, so we've kind of got this, cape on that does all superhuman things, but then at the same time, we go home and, we've still got kids to attend to and stuff that happens in life. So the interesting thing when I hear about your story around your third space, because it ties into a moment where our mutual friend Mark had an unfortunate circumstance. So can you perhaps walk through how you come about like the third space and just explain kind of what it means, what it is?
Yeah, so what the third space is basically, we move between spaces. So the first space is what we're doing now, second space is what we're about to do. Mm-hmm. So I've just been surfing with dolphins this morning, hence why I'm in shorts and t-shirt, and now I'm here and I've got to switch on to this. And then the next thing I do is I've got a couple of calls to make and then I've got to go home. So we transition between different worlds where we're expected to be different things. And how it came about is, I had a couple of instances, and the thing about a presenter is you've got to be on. You can't just kind of show up and go, I'm going to be half. I'll give it half effort, or I'm not really into it today. Like you got to bring your A game. And I've had food poisoning and halfway through the presentation run off stage and vomited and come back. And as you alluded to, a very close friend of ours passed away. But I got the phone call from Dennis to say that it happened 5 minutes before I was supposed to go on stage to talk to 5,000 people.
Wow.
And it was just like, oh my God, what do I do? And my first impulse was to leave, and then I went, hang on, I've got 5,000 people that are sitting here and I've been paid to do this job. And it's kind of like, I've got a choice. Do I fall apart and run away, or do I pull it together? And I just kind of went, I'm going to pull it together, and then I'm going to deal with that afterwards. And just that ability in that moment to hear, some devastating news, but then go, I have to do something here. Not explain this very well, but what I found is that there's moments in life where you've got to switch on and you've got to bring your A game, whether it's a presentation, whether it's sales. And anyway, this started me thinking about how people transition from one thing to another. And I used to work with elite athletes years ago, and one of the things a couple of coaches said was it's not what they do during the point, but what they do in between the points. Like, how does a tennis player go from they lose a point or they have a disappointment, how do they use that gap to compose themselves and then make the most of the next thing?
Right.
Same with salespeople. Where does call reluctance occur? In between phone calls. They make a phone call that doesn't go very well, and then in that gap they talk themselves out of taking that action, and they go, I think I should clean my desk for a couple of hours instead. So what we started to look at is how people transition, and the gap in between is called the third space. So it's between what we're doing now and what we're about to do. It's that transitional gap. So we started to explore that, and one of the biggest things was how people transition from work to home. And so I teach people about the third space and how they could use it. But one of the things they said is, I use it in that gap between work and home to show up better when I walk through that door. And whenever people used it, like we told them, do something in that gap, whether it's listen to a podcast or read a book or do some relaxation or go past the beach on the way home. And people started to say, when I really use that gap between work and home, I show up better. And we started to explore it a little bit deeper, and we found that there were certain stages to it. And that's how it came about, just really from observing that these top performers kind of use that transitional space to get over what they've just been through, but most importantly, get their head right for the next thing.
Yeah, because I guess there's that gap, to me, is probably responsible for most people's inaction to anything. Whether we're talking in sales in the business sense, but then it could also be like asking a person to go on a date or
Totally.
just ask for a pay rise. Like, it could be any sort of scenario or situation where that thought process kind of says, you know what, I'm going to talk myself out of it, and then I shuffle papers for 30 minutes or whatever. Right? So have you ascertained a couple of reasons what makes people flick that switch and get into the third space easier than others? Is it something that's a learned thing? Is it something that is intuitive, or do you find that certain people have developed a knack for it and had a system like you kind of explained? This is what I do in between appointments, in between calls, between coming home. Like, that's another thing I want to touch on is, you know, transitioning from work to home, because everyone's work life kind of really blends now, yeah?
Yeah, very much. So, I mean, let's get detailed here. To answer your question before, like, I think some people have a natural tendency to, in everything they do. Like, some people are just naturally gifted at this thing. But the third space is definitely a skill you can learn. So what we started to do was really boil it down to, you know, what are the stages? Because you talked about, you know, it's not only our behavior, but also the mindset we bring to something. Like, too often, what we found in our research is too often we're doing this, and then we go into the next thing, but we take the mood and mindset of this into that.
There we go, yeah.
So you can go from, say you're just doing admin and process stuff, and then you got to go to a meeting that's about ideas and innovation. Most people just go from this thing to that thing, but what they take is this mindset of things are black and white, and so they're thinking about innovation in this kind of process steps, like black and white way, which is not the way to do things. And it's even taking that moment, that gap to respond. You know, we wrote the book, The Third Space, and it was very popular and it sold really well. And I'm a White Ribbon ambassador, and how that came about is, you know, a guy who was head of research for White Ribbon rang me and said, I just read your book. He said, you know, we've never met, but he said, I'm reading your book thinking we've got millions of third spaces, because it's the gap between stimulus and response.
Yeah, so true.
And, you know, something happens to us, there's a tiny gap, then we respond. And he said, the problem with violence against women is, you know, when does it occur? Because it's not about, you don't have to teach them that's bad.
Yeah, exactly right.
And he said, what the problem is, when does violence occur? Angry, frustrated, they're having an argument. And what we have to do is teach men the ability to use that gap to choose a healthier response rather than resorting to violence.
Totally.
So in our research, we started to look at, well, what are the stages? And there's 3 distinct stages. So the first one is called reflect. So when we kind of go through something, we make sense of it. And what we looked at is that as you transition out of something, can you reflect on it, but in a healthy way? Because most people will reflect on what sucked, what was bad, what did I screw up, how could that have been better? But also looking at, well, what went well, what did I learn, how did I get better then? And what we found is when people reflect in that way, not only helps them learn, but it gives them a burst of happiness, but also makes them more optimistic. Like, they're thinking about progress, which they carry into the next thing. The second phase was rest, and that is where we become still and present. So too often we blurt into the next thing, but we're still thinking about, I've got to do this, or that client wasn't very happy about that. We're not present. So that rest phase is, can you come back to the present moment? And the third thing is reset, where you think about, what am I trying to achieve in that next thing? Like, what do I have to be? How do I have to behave? What sort of attitude? So if you're going into a sales meeting, it's about have non-anxious presence. You know, I've got to be calm, be focused. So it's getting them to almost mentally rehearse, like an athlete, here's how I want to perform. So really that transition, how do I reflect? Can I rest so I come back to the present moment so I think clear, and then reset, this is how I need to show up. So those were the 3 phases. And you talk about the transition from work to home. We started to teach people that. So can you reflect on the day in a healthy way? Can you do something in that commute home that calms you and focuses you? And then go, well, what do I want? What sort of dad do I want to be? What sort of partner do I want to be? How do I want to behave? And so we did a university study. We got 600 people. We taught them the technique. We measured them pre and post, and we saw many changes, but one of them was a 41% improvement in mood in the home. So the homes got happier by 41%. Like, what people talk about is dramatically changes their life. It has a huge impact. So yeah, I mean, that's the concept and the work we've been doing.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess the challenge is that between that stimulus and response, like I'm thinking in my own life, so if my response is anger or frustration, like I've got 3 boys, you know what I mean? So I'm
a lot of anger.
Angry and frustrated all the time. So that gap between stimulus and response is one that I really have to master, because you can easily be taken over by that emotion, and then all of a sudden you're the worst dad in the world, or the worst husband in the world. You say the nastiest things. How have you been able to implement that into your own life or in the life of your clients?
Yeah, I mean, very specific, because I've got 2 daughters, and as you said, sometimes they just drive you crazy.
Let's be honest.
And no one's ever perfect, but one of the things I concentrate on is in that reflection is focus on empathy. Like, why are they doing this? Well, because they're 3.
Yes.
Get over yourself.
Sure.
She's 3. Don't flip your lid. And that pause of just taking that moment just to take a breath, just not open your mouth in that moment, and then think, well, what am I trying to achieve here? Yeah. I use it in parenting heaps, because rather than just scream and yell at my kids, I talk them around. Yeah. But it does take effort. But I use that strategy so many times.
It's a huge amount of effort, and I think there's 2 things I'm picking up on. What you explained to most people is work, and then people are like, I've got enough to do already. You just added 50 fucking things to my list. Now all of a sudden I'm buried by this stuff. Yeah. However, it's so important because of that 41%. Like what you're saying is you're happier 40. Like that's a big jump. That's not like just a 5% increase. If anyone had a 40% increase in any area of their life, it'd be massive.
Yeah, huge.
So let's maybe touch on happiness. I've got this thing, because I'm really into now teaching around values and beliefs, around how we label things as young human beings. We model people that are we around the most, and we kind of go, that's anger, that's frustration, or this is what money is, like that's our opinion of it. And then we have these sort of learned responses. We grow up and we start to emulate a lot of the people that have influenced us the most. And you mentioned something before, like, what kind of dad do I want to be? What kind of boss do I want to be? They're questions that a lot of us have never really been asked to ask.
Yeah.
So we go through school and high school and university, and no one says, the common question would be, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah.
But no one says, what kind of dad do you want to be? What kind of husband do you want to be? What kind of role model do you want to be in society? So we never kind of get to that point where we're really understanding, what's my ideal partner? What are the things that light me up, that make time stand still? What will I stand for? What's my purpose in life? So we get back to meaning and purpose.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, we do it at work a bit because we're kind of given KPIs and goals, but even like I run a lot of leadership training and development, and we say to leaders, like, what do you want to stand for? Like, when your staff talk about you, what do you want them to say? And people just like, I don't know, never
That's right, it. Blank.
Yeah, and you ask people what brings them meaning and purpose, and most people are just haven't even thought about it. And I think one of the things that is like a chronic problem in society is a lack of self-awareness.
Definitely.
And particularly with men. So we like one of the things we do with our leadership training is rather than teach them about concepts, they experience it in the workshop. Rather than sort of describing a neurological pathway or something, we get them to experience it in the moment. And one of the things, we get them to look at situations and how they responded to it. But so many of them, you go, well, how'd you feel about that? And they're like, do you reckon you're angry? Yeah, I was probably angry, yeah. What else?
Not really conscious of what's going on. Yeah.
Were you frustrated? Oh yeah, maybe I was frustrated.
Sure.
But even, I think the other thing that's happening too is we're so quick to look at other people's behaviour. Yeah. And even departments like marketing, bloody marketing, or legal, or this person, and we kind of look at other people and go, they've got to work on this and they've got to do that. But we lack that ability to go, well, what's my role in that? And what do I need to do? And just because it's so safe to point the finger at other people, but it's really uncomfortable to kind of look at our own behaviour.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't even know how did we get there? What
Yeah,
were
look,
your original question was?
I don't think it was so much of a question, to be honest, but I think it's an observation that people aren't asking what I would consider really important life questions.
Yeah.
And I was leading towards the happiness thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so personally, I've gone through a transition in the last couple of years where I'm now doing things that I feel what lights me up the most, what I feel like I'm serving the most, getting the most passion and vibrancy.
Yeah.
And the caveat that I want to put on there, and it's hasn't been easy, because I'm faced with values like certainty and consistent income, and all that kind of stuff, and safe, and all those sort of things that come with a secure job, if you could call anything like that these days. So what I want to try and get out of you is, in all the organisations, the hundreds of people you've interviewed, surveyed, that you've worked with, why do we have a society or a world that we live in with an abundant amount of information at our fingertips, an abundant amount of opportunity, so we can start a business? Like, when I first bought my business, it was a $100,000 buy-in, right? But I can buy into a business now with $500, and I'm on the internet and I'm selling stuff.
Yeah.
So the world's changed. Why are we that much closer together in terms of how we can travel, how we can communicate? However, there is more scarcity, there are more people without, there are more people unhappy, more depressed, more suicides. People are popping pills left, right and centre. We know with our good friend where that led him. Why have we got such a disparity between the haves and have-nots, or people living their life of their own choosing? Like, it doesn't make sense in my eyes. It doesn't marry up.
Bigger questions.
See, this is the thing. I know intuitively why that is, but you've researched it, which is what I love about your work. You've really studied people and why they do the things that they do. So,
a couple of things. Like, this is a big conversation. A couple of things. Number one is, what we've got to understand is that we're emotional beings, not rational beings.
Totally.
Like, we're driven by emotion. We're not driven by logic. And so we make decisions on how we feel. And you talked about happiness before. Here's the biggest problem. This happiness movement that we've gone through has been insanely dysfunctional because people expect to feel good all the time.
correct.
And what they're after is, I just want to feel happy. And what they're after is that comfort. But a couple of things is, number one, happiness is an emotion that comes and goes. So it shows up for a bit, we're happy, and then we feel sad or angry or frustrated. And people go, I don't want that other stuff, I just want the happiness. And it's delusional.
Right.
But the other thing too is that, and you made this distinction, I can't remember how you phrased it, what we're focusing on, what is more important is fulfillment. So do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel like I'm contributing? Do I feel like I'm growing? And we've got to get away from happiness and to focus on that. And what we found is most people feel fulfilled after they've got their ass kicked but got back up.
Yeah.
So, like, we feel best about ourselves when we get in the trenches, we fight it out, we crawl out the other side, we look back and go, that's what I'm hanging my hat on.
Yeah.
But that felt like shit.
Yeah, of course.
That was uncomfortable, and I was scared, and I doubted myself, and like, we feel this whole spectrum of emotion. And what we've got to get away from is, am I happy am I growing, am I evolving, am I challenging myself?
Yeah.
And we don't want misery, but we want discomfort, meaning, I want to challenge myself, I want to push you think about, like, the average, I don't know, we kind of talked about men before. Like, the biggest problem with men is that their greatest fear is don't be perceived as weak. Like, be anything, be an asshole, be disconnected, be emotionally unavailable, just don't be weak.
Yeah, sure.
And one of the biggest problems men have in their evolution is that, oh my God, if I'm going to be vulnerable or I'm going to talk about my emotions, that's going to feel bad. That's going to feel uncomfortable, or I'm out of control.
Yeah.
And what we have to move away, I mean, what we're finding in the Kuwait project, like, it's the most fascinating thing I've ever done. Their biggest problem, they don't have enough struggle. Like, they've got
really?
so
This is
much.
too easy.
No.
Right.
This place, and first of all, like, what I want to preface it, when you go to the Middle East, particularly with how the West is talking about Muslims and all that sort of stuff, people kind of have this judgment. They're beautiful people.
Yeah.
They're bloody awesome. They're funny, they're articulate, they're intelligent. You know, people talk about certain races or religions, and I go, well, how many people do you know of that race or religion?
Yes.
How many could you call on the phone and have a
Totally.
conversation?
Great
You know, like, oh, 0. But I got hundreds of them, and I go to this country and I interact with them, and they're beautiful people. But their problem is they have so much wealth and so much abundance that no one is uncomfortable.
Really?
They're so looked after. Like, years ago, they had this obscene surplus, and they went with everyone's debt.
Really?
And they did.
Bullshit. I
Yeah.
did not know that.
And like, if you have a baby, they'll throw, you know, 100 grand. You lose your job, you just get this payout. And they also said there has to be 100% employment, but there's only so many jobs. So most people don't go to work. Like, the average government employee works between 1 and 5 hours a week.
No.
So their problem is they don't have enough struggle and challenge.
Really?
And inherently, human beings need that. So what we've got to, I think the big problem is we've got to move our mindset away from, I want to feel good all the time. And also, if I feel bad, that's okay.
Sure. But also, like, what I get from that is not focusing on when shit times do come, because inevitably they will. You get knocked down. You know that. Instead of saying, why is this happening to me? Why do I always get the short end of this? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All those colloquial phrases come to
Yeah.
mind, you know? Mate, nothing ever goes good for me. I'm always getting knocked down. Every time I go 2 steps forward, I get knocked 1 step back, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is kind of like that, what's that guy's name? Ryan Holiday. It's like the obstacle is the way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what makes us growth. I think a lot of people don't understand. Most of us, I would say, in our deepest core, we feel better when we rise to the occasion.
Yeah.
One of our deepest values is growth. If we're not growing and we're staying the same,
Totally.
then it's really not actually staying the same. It's actually regressing and dying. And so when we feel like we're not getting ahead and going backwards, then we feel shit.
Yeah.
And then you live in that puddle, you know, for sometimes a lifetime.
Yeah, and like you talked about success before, and you know, our business has been pretty successful, but far out, like, I've had my ass handed to me so many times.
Yeah.
Like, I remember I was living on, like, when I was building the business, I was earning about $400 a week, but my expenses were $440, and I remember going, where am I going to find $40?
Yeah, right.
Like, that was my biggest concern
Yeah.
at the time. And you know, you screw up and you make mistakes and you embarrass yourself, and that's all part of it. And it was interesting, we had a couple of speakers who were out for dinner, and we were all talking about how our business came about, and there was one presenter there who'd had an accident and had a massive payout, and he kind of like built his business with massive cash flow.
Yeah.
And whereas we built our business with nothing. And what I really noticed is the difference between us, who just got our ass kicked over and over again, versus him being able to buy everything we want, was it was really obvious. Like, he hadn't learnt those lessons, and that humility, and that I think it's
Yeah, I totally get it. And I think that what we have a tendency to do as human beings, and this is exemplified, I guess, or exaggerated on social media and things like this, because let's say, someone might look at me and go, I think you're successful and I want to have your life, or I wish I had the things that you do, right?
Yeah.
But then I look at you and go, I wish I had like the success that you had, the level of success. And you might go, I'm going to look at Richard Branson and go, I wish I had the level of success. So we're all sort of doing this comparative thing where, like, we don't understand, or we don't really articulate in our own mind what you had to go through in order to get where you are. Like, you're just at a different level than me. You've gone through more shit than what I have. And you know more, you've gone through different levels. I explained this the other day, like, you were playing Donkey Kong, you know, like you sort of
if you go through and complete level 1, doesn't mean the game's over.
Yeah.
You just go to level 2, but
Yeah.
it gets harder and harder each level, and then your skill set has to rise in order to conquer the entire game. Is that making sense at all?
Totally. And I've gone through a thing where I don't do they've got that, I want that anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's come about. I can't explain how it's happened, but like when I first started out, it was like they got that car, or they've got that many gigs, or they got that client, and that wanting.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, but it stopped. And it's been the greatest thing.
Really?
Like the inner peace it brings you and the focus it gives you is just critical. And and now it's much more about contribution. It's like, well, how can we do some cool work, or how can we make an impact? And it's gone away from I want this or I want that thing to, well, what's our contribution?
Correct.
And that's probably been the biggest step in my life.
Do you think it's an age thing? Do you think you go through a phase of accumulating things to then just wanting to make a difference, or to serve, or to have deeper meaning?
I was having this conversation with a guy called Nigel Marsh. He wrote Fat, 40 and Fired.
Yeah.
The guy's a bloody genius. We have breakfast once a year. And we were talking about this, and what his sort of light bulb moment was he got fired from his job. He was the CEO of a big organization, and what we were discussing is, can you be more enlightened and grow and evolve without like one of the big four, which is usually you get sick, you get divorced, you lose your job.
Yeah, all the big pushes. All right, so if it's not an age thing as such, or a maturity thing, is it something that you mentioned before around self-awareness and perhaps values? Like the reason maybe you're not as attached to possessions and things, and you're more attached, or if we could say attached to meaning and purpose and contribution, is because you now know yourself. Whereas before you're chasing someone else's values or someone else's ideals of success. So therefore you're kind of, I quote Stephen Covey, where you go to the top of the ladder, you chase it climb it to the top rung, and you realise it's leaning against the wrong fucking wall. You know, so it's not your thing.
Do you know what I think it is? It's Matt Damon.
Okay.
No, I'm serious.
I love Matt Damon.
Yeah, but I was watching Graham Norton, and Matt Damon was on there, and Graham Norton said to him, like, what was it like to win the Academy Award so young? And for the people watching this who haven't seen it, is he actually got quite serious, and he said, I got the award, went to all the parties, went home, put it on the kitchen table, and just stared at it for about an hour. And he said, my realization was, I'm so glad I didn't screw anyone over to get this. He said, because I wanted it so bad, when I got it, it didn't fill the hole that I thought it would.
Wow.
And he said, even better, I'm lucky I won it at 20, whatever he was, because if I'd spent my whole life chasing it and got it at 70, I would have just gone, I would have been devastated. And I think that's, if I was going to give people advice about life in general, I think number one, we've got to be really careful what we're chasing. Because the most common thing I see is I work with really highly paid, sophisticated, powerful people, and the most common conversation is, this hasn't been worth it.
Really?
Yeah, like if I'd do it over again, I'd do it differently. I was working with a professional services firm, one of the big firms, and they kept talking about the partner formula. I'm like, what's the partner formula? And they go, well, they work really hard, make partner. They're earning lots of money, but huge amount of pressure. So they work so much, they get distant from the family. And the family's kind of doing their thing, and and this divide break, becomes. And they're at work, and let's say it's a man and a young girl smiles at them, and well, I'm not getting any connection from these people, and they have an affair. Then the family finds out, so that falls apart. And what they've built with this new person, who they're hanging on to because they're lonely, isn't really solid. So they have a couple of kids, it falls apart. They're 60, they've got two families, all their money's gone to them, and they're alone, and they're like, what the hell was that all about? And most of them kill themselves. Like, that's the formula.
Wow.
And these people are earning crazy money and status and the whole bit, but So I think you've got to be really careful about what is it that I want and what is it that I'm chasing, and asking those questions about, what are my values? Who do I want to be? What sort of impact do I have? So I get very clear about that. I think the second thing is also, I have a mentor called Colin James, and he taught me the greatest lesson ever. And he said, the thing I've learned is no one anywhere in the world knows what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
And he said, you see CEOs in meetings go, yeah, we'll do that. And then they get back to their office and they're like, how the hell am I going to make that happen? And that's kind of my whole life is, you take on stuff and you go, how the hell am I going to do that? But you give it your best shot. So I think don't look around at other people and go, they have it together. Because I did this thing with a really senior group, and they had to write down their negative thoughts and emotions, like what they said to them about themselves inside their head. And then I got them to read it out, and the thing people took away was, oh my God, we all feel the same way.
Yes.
But everyone in that room sitting there going, I'm the fraud, they've all got it together. I hope they don't find out that I don't know what I'm doing.
Sure, I don't want to be exposed.
Yeah, but everyone had the same thing. So I think, cut yourself a bit of slack, because we're all just making it up. And I think the third thing is about that discomfort piece. Can I tolerate the discomfort? And I think where we go really wrong is we run away from that. We seek the comfort. And even psychology has had a huge shift away from our negative thoughts and emotions. Like, we were told they're bad, challenge them, replace them with healthier ones, stop them.
Yes.
And what psychology is saying now is actually, that's the worst thing to do. Can you notice them and accept them as thoughts and emotions, but do the right action in spite of them? Right. So can you notice your thoughts? Can you accept them? I'm doubting myself. Okay, well, I often doubt myself. But you know what? I'm going to notice that, I'm going to acknowledge that that's happening, but I'm still going to have a go. Like, that's where psychology's going. So I think it's much more about, Brené Brown, I love her stuff. And I spent 3 days with her doing some training, and she talks about getting the arena. And I think one thing I've done really well in my life is I get in the arena. Yeah. Like, if I'm going down swinging. And
I think that's most people's challenge. They're just not even in the game.
Yeah. And you look at social media, and I took this stand. So me and a couple of the most booked speakers in the country did this thing where we no longer spoke at conferences that only had male presenters, or wouldn't be on a panel with all male.
Yeah.
And it got picked up, and it was huge. I got interviewed by BBC World News and Canada and Middle East, and you get a lot of people attacking you on social media for doing that.
Really?
Of course, men.
Yeah.
And it didn't bother me that much, because I just went, they're the cheap seats.
Yes.
You guys are on the side throwing rocks, but you're not actually in the game.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to get in the arena. Whether the arena is, I got to be a better dad. Whether the arena is, I got to be less of a douchebag when I'm at work.
Yeah.
Can I start to think about how I affect my staff? Can I apologize? Can I own my own mistakes? The discomfort of that allows us to grow. I think that's really, really critical.
I think you touched on a really key point. One of the things I remember discussing within my group of clients is, when you do get knocked down, you do get critique, because a lot of people get really set back by negative feedback, negative comments, all that kind of stuff. It kind of really rocks the boat. And you've got to really understand, who's that coming from and where are they placed in the game, so to speak, Because if they're right in amongst it, and I'm getting critiqued by you, you know what? I'm going to listen because you've done some shit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if it's the guy on the sidelines or the girl on the sidelines who's done sweet FA with their life, that sort of thing, it's
Exactly.
how much really can I kind of listen to advice or critique, criticism like that?
Yeah, and what you got to think about with that person is, where is that feedback coming from? Is it from, I really want you to succeed and I think you need to know this? Or is it how do I cut you down so I feel better about myself?
Is it a reflection of their own insecurities or damaging beliefs?
I think another key thing I've learnt recently is what's our relationship with failure like?
Love that.
And I spent some time with Carol Dweck. Have you heard of her? She wrote a book called Mindsets. Woman's a bloody genius. She's head of psychology at Stanford. So she came up with growth and fixed mindsets.
Yeah.
That's her research. And I was talking to her about my daughters, and I said every day I ask them 3 questions, which is what went well, what did you enjoy, what are you looking forward to tomorrow? Because, I met Marty Seligman, sort of the father of positive psychology, and he said you should ask them those questions, which I do. And I told her about that, and she went, it's a bit fluffy.
Really?
Yeah, she's like, let's get a bit of realism happening.
Right.
And I said, well, she said, fine to ask them those questions, but add 2 more. I said, what are they? She said, ask them what they struggled with but didn't give up on. And I went, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And the second question was, ask them what they failed at.
Yeah, right.
Like, what did they try? And it was a disaster. And I went home and asked them the 3 normal questions, asked them the struggle question, which they went, oh, Daddy, this was hard, and they talked about this and that, they could do that. Then I asked them the failure question, and they couldn't answer it. And they kind of looked at me like, what's wrong with Daddy?
Yeah.
And my eldest daughter is a real perfectionist. Things go wrong, she flips out. Like, she likes everything to be right. And when she makes a mistake, she has a really hard time. And I kept asking this question. It took them weeks before they could answer it. But what I saw is their relationship with failure changed. Away from shame, shouldn't talk about it, to, well, if I'm trying to get better, I'm going to make mistakes, I'm going to fail.
Yeah.
And this one day, my daughter came in the house, and we have this long hallway, and she walks in the door from school. I said, and I'm walking up the hall, she goes, Bells. I said, Bells, how was school? She goes, awesome, failed at 4 things, and gave me a high five.
Really? That's terrific.
So her relationship with it has totally changed. And you think about business, I was talking to the top analyst at Ernst & Young, and I said, what's the biggest problem in business? He goes, that leaders don't get bad news.
Yeah.
Like, they don't get told, oh yeah, this doesn't work, or we made a mistake.
Yes.
Because they think they're going to get in trouble. And one of the most amazing experiences, I spent 2 weeks at the Toyota factory. I was doing some work down there. And they have this, well, they had this section, it's now shut down. Like, there's this huge square on the floor, like the size of this room, in yellow tape, and there's just stuff thrown in there. And I said to the guy who runs the plant, he's giving me the tour, I said, what's that? He goes, that's our screw-up pile.
Right.
What? He goes, yeah, they're all the things we've stuffed up. And he said, we have a meeting and we talk about it. I said, I've got to be at that meeting. So I went along, and this guy with the clipboard goes, whose is that? This group go, yeah, that's ours. And he goes, what happened? Oh, yeah, we totally. But his questions were, do you know what happened? Yes. How can you fix it? Yeah, we know what we've got to do. Good. And then other people go, yeah, we're screwed up and we've got no idea. And we're going to spend. But no one kind of went,
Look,
it was them.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, but that other group did. Everyone just went, yeah, that's our stuff up.
Right.
Just this amazing, but what that saved is so much time, because people aren't bickering and politicking.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, that was a mistake, we can fix that.
And particularly, as you said before, like, we're emotional beings, we like, that would save a lot, because emotion, to my understanding, has so much more energy and power and information and data that can really aid us and screw us up at the same time.
Yeah.
So if you take all of that out of the equation, then you have a higher chance of being happier, which is what we said 20 minutes ago. You've got a higher probability of having things go right in life, which then sort of gives you that 41% chance of having, things increase, And
it's about that ability to go, I screwed up, and sit with that discomfort, because too often we won't. And it's that ability to tolerate actually, I really made a bad error there. It is a critical thing, and we're going to do that our whole life. So, can we start to think about that discomfort or that failure or that is just part of the process, and that rather than I want to run away from that, can I sit with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally get it, and I'm similar to you. Not with the questions with my kids, but similar to, I made a mistake. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
So what do you not do next time? Like, it's just that conditioning to go, like, well, now you know what not to do. So what do you do next time? Oh, well, I just do this.
Great. And you mentioned kids. Like, the problem is everyone gets a prize.
Yes.
Everyone gets told they're wonderful. no one goes, that was terrible.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
You need to work on that.
Yeah, we're kind of bubbling and putting him in a bubble wrap
Yeah.
and cushioning their feelings.
And so, yeah, that's my thing.
I love it. All right.
Yeah.
I've got 2 more questions.
Cool.
What I'm picking up a lot on is that some people have this ability intuitively, innately, like they've just been raised by it. They've got the certain clear path in life. Other people just really need to learn different ways of doing things. That's all it is. It's like just a new skill.
Yep.
So the mindset of an achiever, and when I say achiever, again, this whatever facet of life, because I think when we're trying to attain this thing called balance, which is a whole nother conversation, like let's just try and be good at work and be better at work. Let's try and be better at boss, a better mum, husband, father, whatever. Right? So let's just try and increase our productivity and success in all of those areas, and hopefully we'll grow up to be more better balanced human beings. So what's that? Can you cultivate that mindset? Can you put it into 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things?
If you look at goal orientation theory, it talks about that to achieve a goal, we can be driven by 3 things. Number 1, to win, and that is I want the prize. I want the money, I want the applause, or I want to feel good because I beat someone else. So I want to win. What drives me is to win. The next one is to not lose, and that is I don't really care about winning, I just don't want to come last. Like I just don't want to look bad. So their whole mindset is how do I protect and be safe. And the third thing that can drive us is mastery. And that is where what drives me is I want to get good at the task. So the whole piece is, what we know is that people that are driven by mastery are much more resilient and attached to values and contribution than win or lose. So win or lose is more extrinsic, mastery is more intrinsic. And you think about the 10,000 hours, right? We have this magic number of 10,000 hours that we're supposed to do to be world class. And that was really popularized by Malcolm Gladwell. But the problem with Gladwell is he's a journalist, not a researcher. And the original research was done by a guy called Andre Erickson.
Right.
And one, it's not 10,000, it's much more like 20 or 30.
Yeah.
But what the key thing Erickson discovered about world class people is the way they practice. And the way they practice is in discomfort. So they don't practice the stuff they're good at. They go, well, I'm good at that, but how do I stretch myself that much? It's that 1%. Like, what is the mastery? What am I going to master in this practice session? So it's if you're a golfer, you practice the shots that challenge you. You put the ball in a way where it's harder than before. So what he showed is that people that are world class practice in an uncomfortable state. You're a musician, whether it's a piano player or a violinist, they don't just rock up and play the pieces they're really good at. So I think a key thing there is what are you trying to master? Like, what's that 1%? And it's not just work, it's, the biggest thing that drives me at the moment is parenting. So how do I be more compassionate? How do I, in that moment, look at my daughter who's having a meltdown and go, well, what is the best thing to do here rather than just scream and yell? My marriage, in my presenting. So whenever I go out and present, I'm just like, well, what's the one thing I'm going to work on? Like, is it gestures? Is it about verticality? Is it about how do I change the physiology of the room? So how do I move the group? So every time I go out, it's that deliberate thing of what's the little bit I'm going to do better. Yeah. So I think that's a key thing of how do I continually progress?
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, one final question. I could eat this up all day, this kind of chat. I appreciate your...
I think I've got flow. This has gone so far.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it? All right, the show I've aptly named Life Lessons.
Yep.
So could you leave us with a life lesson? So if you were to say that like none of your books are around anymore, none of your YouTube clips or anything on Facebook is all gone, but you need to have a parting way of saying, like, if you're going to do anything, do this. What would your life lesson be?
All right, you are asking the big questions. I think one of the greatest, like you hear stuff that has an impact. And I'll do two. One from Carol Dweck that I was talking to. She said the problem is that we equate struggle with failure. Like if it's hard, that's bad. And she said, but we've got to have the mindset of struggle equals development. So if I'm uncomfortable, that means I'm getting better. So that has profoundly impacted my life. Because we're changing our business at the moment and it sucks. It just feels terrible. But I just sit in that. The reason I'm uncomfortable is I'm trying to get better. Yeah. The second thing, and this is one of the most profound lessons I've ever learned, is that we judge our behaviour on our intention. Other people judge our behaviour on our actions. And you can have profoundly good intention, but be a dickhead at the same time.
Totally.
And I think that is one of the greatest lessons, is that we don't often think about our impact on others. And what that got me thinking about is, how do I impact other people? And that while my intention might be really good in this moment, are my actions aligned to that? So this is what I'm trying to achieve, but am I behaving in a way that gets me closer to that? Because too often we do that. Like we have this intention, but we act in an incongruent way.
Totally.
Yeah. Wow. So that's all the wisdom I have.
Thank you.
I'm out.
No worries, mate.
That's
a good dump of wisdom there.
Yep.
Mate, thank you so much for your time
pleasure.
today.
Good to see you again.
Lovely to see you as well and connect again. Super grateful for your time, so much appreciated. There you go, guys. Adrian here for Life Lessons episode number 29 with Dr. Adam Fraser. I'll see you guys on the next episode. So Life Lessons TV, look, it's going to be sort of, I think, a little bit edgy. I think it's going to be a little bit off the cuff. I'm letting you know now that once I get excited about a topic, I might swear a little bit. I might let a couple of curses go. So it's one of those things where I think I just want things to be kind of real.